That's not a foreign film. It's a warm and funny scene from Breaking Away, a new American comedy with no big-name stars, yet I think it's one of the year's best pictures.
I do, too.
Great. Breaking Away is just one of 5 new movies we'll be reviewing on Sneak Previews, 2 film critics talking about the latest pictures in town. The other guy who likes Breaking Away is Roger Ebert, film critic of the Chicago Sun-Times.
And across the aisle from me is Gene Siskel, film critic of the Chicago Tribune. Now, in addition to Breaking Away, which really is one of the most delightful movies we'll be reviewing all summer, we'll also be looking at George Burns and Brooke Shields in Just You and Me, Kid, Gene Wilder as the Frisco Kid, Kirk Douglas as the villain, and now Gene's going to start with Golden Girl.
Do you hear a dog barking?
Gene, is it that bad, Gene?
You bet it is. It's time to review Golden Girl, a truly dumb film about a crazed Nazi scientist's attempt to train a woman sprinter to win 3 gold medals in the 1980 Olympics. The scientist wants to prove some cockeyed theory about body size relating to speed. It makes no sense at all. Susan Anton, the former Muriel cigar model, plays the runner being trained, and sometimes the training gets on her nerves, like when she watches with a coach some inspirational tapes of former Olympic champions. Pretty weak, wasn't it? And that was Leslie Caron as the coach. There's a career in ruins. Now, some of the other running scenes in the picture are speeded up just to make the running look fast, and you can tell the scenes have been speeded up because the people in the background, the people in the stands, they're all jumping around like crazy people. Now, nothing is sillier, though, than Susan Anton's love scene with her advertising manager, James Coburn. Get ready to laugh at this one. You know, what more needs to be said? Golden Girl may be the first motion picture to indict itself.
It does do a good job of one thing, though, indicting itself.
Yeah.
Think about it. This is a movie about a totally artificial woman. Kurt Jurgens was her father.
The
scientist. He pumped her full of steroids and hormones and vitamin pills and minerals since she was 2 years old. He made her 6'2". This is his creation, kind of like Frankenstein's monster in a way. And the actress, Susan Anton, is a creation in the same way. She doesn't really exist for me as an actress, as somebody who can convince me that she's playing a role. I think she hit the high point of her career as the Muriel Cigar Girl. So you have a bionic woman playing a bionic woman. There are kind of ironies within ironies.
And there's another thing here that's wrong, too. This is sort of a creeping television movie. She's a model. She has a pretty face. She might as well be one of the Charlie's Angels. The picture was financed in part by NBC TV, which is planning to show it next year in a longer version as part of its Olympic coverage when they do the Olympics next year. There's that interest. Also, all those visual tricks we were talking about, speeding things up, that all might work on the little screen where you can't make out things so well. But on the big screen, this film is really rotten, and you can see why. So I don't like it when television industry starts to get in and making big movies, because there aren't enough movies being made. Let the professionals do it.
Well, one of the problems this summer, at least with this program, is that some of the movies that are getting made aren't necessarily masterpieces either. And that's true of the next one, unfortunately, even though one of the happiest developments, I have to admit, out of Hollywood in recent years has been what you could call the third career of comedian George Burns. He was a star in vaudeville. He was a star during the golden days of radio. Then he came out of retirement and won an Oscar for The Sunshine Boys, and he made millions of dollars in Oh, God. And Burns is now 83 years old. He's a national treasure, and that makes his new movie all the more disappointing. It's called Just You and Me, Kid. It stars Burns as a retired vaudeville star named Bill Grant, who, by the way, looks and sounds and talks and moves just like George Burns. And he befriends a young runaway played by Brooke Shields. And all of this, unfortunately, sounds a lot more interesting than it really is. Burns takes the 14-year-old girl home with him. She's a reluctant house guest, but his middle-aged daughter is scandalized by thoughts of what might be happening behind his closed doors. Well, I said it wasn't a very good movie, but you have to admit that Burns is kind of endearing and lovable there. And I think you can see that he's still a perfectionist when it comes to timing his one-liners. He's fun to watch. He's fun to listen to. But the trouble with Just You and Me, Kid, is that that's about all we can admire. The other characters aren't developed. Brooke Shields seems mostly bored by the proceedings, and Burns is basically just walking through a role playing himself. Well, nobody else could do him better, but I like him better when he's playing somebody else, one of the Sunshine Boys, for example, or God.
Well, I agree with you. It's about half of a movie. Brooke Shields is not very interesting when she's on the screen. The two of them never connect together. Here's a case of another model like Susan Anton, who just can't act. These models are designed, you know, to be interesting visually. When we see them on the screen, they're always interesting looking.
They sure are,
but
yeah.
they can't seem to get a whole person or a character.
You don't
there.
get the feeling a person is there.
No.
The thing that I like most about Just You and Me, Kid, was in the first 10 or 12 minutes before
Yes.
Brooke Shields comes into the film.
Yes.
George Burns wakes up in the morning, not to an alarm clock, but to tape-recorded applause, which would be one way to get me out of bed, I think.
Right.
And he goes downstairs, makes himself a soft-boiled egg, has his daily routine, does a little soft shoe shuffle, and a couple of routines to himself. That was great.
Charming.
You felt then that you were really seeing, if the whole movie had gone like that, it would have been a lot better film.
It could have been a documentary on George Burns. You didn't need the Brooke Shields character, which really comes out of some kind of Disney film, action picture, being chased by a drug dealer as she is in the film. It doesn't make any kind of sense. Now we come to something a lot better.
And high time, too, I might say.
The best thing I think about being a film critic is not getting in to see the movies for free. It's not meeting the movie stars. It's being able to see a truly fine film. I think we love that more than anything. That's why it's a pleasure to review Breaking Away, a small but thoroughly enjoyable film that's one of the year's best. Like all good films, Breaking Away is hard to categorize. It's sort of a slice-of-life comedy about 4 working-class kids from Bloomington, Indiana, who have just graduated from high school, and at least 2 of them can't make up their minds what they want to do next. Fine writing there and throughout Breaking Away, which culminates in a Rocky-like sporting event, a statewide bicycle race. Now, the 4 friends, they have an inferiority complex about the rich college kids in their town. But in this scene, the 4 kids think about entering themselves as a team in the big bike race. Again, fine writing and fine ensemble acting by the film's little-known group of stars. This is a movie where we really care deeply about all of the characters. And along with Rocky II, I think Breaking Away is one of the year's friendliest movies. The film has a lot of affection for these kids and their bewildered parents, and so do we. I loved Breaking Away.
I loved it, too. I really did. I had heard good things about the film, but nothing prepared me for how warm and sunny it would make me feel. It's a good time at the movies. And one of the things that it does really, I think, very well is give you a real sensation for time and place. Bloomington, Indiana, Indiana University, must have been last summer of 1978. Real people that we really get to meet. For example, we find out that a cutter is Indiana University slang for the local limestone cutters who work in the nearby quarries and who, well, after all, they built this campus. And on most other campuses, the cutters would be called townies, which is what I was called when I was growing up near the campus of the University of Illinois, down in downstate Illinois. Maybe that's another reason I like the movie so much. I could identify with those kids. But anyway, let's look at another scene that's also good at showing the kind of warm camaraderie and breaking away. A couple of nights before the big race, one of the boys' fathers, who is himself an ex-limestone cutter, presides over dinner. There's a wonderfully warm feeling there around that dinner table, you know. And these people are middle Americans. They're average Americans, I suppose. Blue-collar worker, the father is. He runs a used car lot. But at the same time, they're not made into boobs. These are not Archie Bunkers. These are amusing, complicated, intelligent people. And just looking at that scene reminded me again, the father, by the way, is played by Paul Dooley. Wonderful performance. He has so much fun around that dining room table. He never knows what's going to happen next. His kid is so obsessed with being a bicycle racer that one day, you know, he can't hear because opera records are playing, and the next day the kid is shaving his legs so that he can have less wind resistance.
Yeah, he thinks he's a big Italian champion. And I think the funniest scene in the whole picture comes when, as you say, he's doing all these things like an Italian champion. He plays these opera records. He's named the dog Fellini instead of the dog's real name, which is Jake. But the thing that really gets his father frosted is when he keeps insisting that he have pasta at dinner. And the father says, I don't want any zucchini, I don't want any linguine, no fettuccine, no ini in this house. It's a marvelously written picture. It's just great.
It really is. And, you know, when you see the scene like that, for example, there was some fairly broad comedy in it, but it's so well-founded on the human values. The screenplay was written by a young man named Steve Tesic, who came actually to this country from Yugoslavia, but who lived in Bloomington, and he won the 1962 Little 500 bicycle race. So he's writing about people he must have known, experiences he had. And it's directed by Peter Yates, who's best known probably for Bullitt with its chase scenes. And this film ends with a very exciting bicycle race.
It concludes with this big bicycle race, which is very exciting. When I saw it, people were cheering. I guess the point to be made, we got a lot of bad pictures on this show, but this is the good one. This is the one to spend the money on. I guarantee this picture, everyone I think will like it. I can't imagine
if you don't like it, just send to Mr. Siskel, care of Public Television.
I'll send the money back. I mean it. I do it.
I'm going to write in tomorrow, you know, and I got in free. But it really is a terrific picture. And now we move on to a not terrific picture. That was kind of the high point, I guess, in the program, because the next film is supposed to be a comic Western, but the problem with the Frisco Kid is that it tries to do way too many things. It wants to be a Western, it wants to be a slapstick comedy and a romance and an adventure and a satire and schmaltz, and what it mostly winds up doing is keeping us confused about how we're supposed to react from moment to moment. Gene Wilder stars in the Frisco Kid as a dim-witted rabbi from Poland who tries to make it across the Wild West to San Francisco in 1850. And Wilder does his usual good acting job even when he's in the midst of scenes that make less sense than they should, and that's certainly the case with this one. Somehow that's not a terrifically original comic idea.
No, it
there,
isn't.
hitting somebody on the toe with a hammer. When we get the slapstick like that, that's one thing, but then the Frisco Kid tries to be tender and heartfelt, too, and it changes its emotional gears so often we just really can't keep up.
Right.
The movie's central relationship is between Wilder as the rabbi and Harrison Ford, you remember him from Star Wars, as a desperado gunslinger who takes pity on Gene Wilder and helps guide him through the West. There comes a time, though, when they finally have to split up. Listen to the violins there. That might have been sort of a nice scene in a different movie, but here it's out of place. It comes after scenes of the broadest slapstick, the broadest farce. It's almost as if the filmmakers are trying to cover every possible emotional base.
I agree with you. The film's all mixed up. But you walk in, I suppose you think it's something like Blazing Saddles. It's got a rabbi in the Old West, a comic situation.
Gene Wilder.
He's been with Mel Brooks in Blazing Saddles, played the wacko kid. You expect something kind of funny. It's also as if they were afraid to have real fun with a religious figure, go crazy. It never happens. So you really are unsettled by what goes on.
The filmmakers never let you know exactly where you're supposed to sit in relation to the film.
Yes.
And I don't say that a film has to have all one tone. If it did, it'd be boring. Breaking Away, which we just talked about, had a lot of different tones but moved between them so confidently. Here it's almost like a roll of the dice. One scene follows the other with no emotional logic at all.
Speaking of bad comic westerns, got another one. The Villain, a western comedy, which is the first film I can recall that's been ripped off from a movie cartoon. Kirk Douglas plays a western badman trying to grab the money and voluptuous body of Anne Margaret. Protecting her is muscle builder Arnold Schwarzenegger wearing a ridiculous powder blue cowboy suit. The scenes in The Villain are direct copies of the old Roadrunner and Coyote cartoons. Kirk Douglas plays the coyote. He's forever tripping himself up, like in this scene, as he spies on Schwarzenegger and Anne Margaret. I think we've seen that one before. That scene shows you, I think, just what's wrong with The Villain. That was too long a build-up with Anne Margaret and Arnold Schwarzenegger talking about absolutely nothing before Douglas finally falls off the cliff. Now, a few of those scenes are funny, and maybe that one just alone, maybe that's funny, but not for 90 minutes. Even the Roadrunner cartoons last for only 10 minutes. Now, we've had plenty of sequels and remakes this year, but ripping off a cartoon has to be about as desperate as you can get for an idea. I rank The Villain, then, right with Golden Girl, as one of the worst major films of the year. I was bored out of my mind.
Hold on just a second, Gene. Now, I don't think it's worth seeing either, but I don't rank it as one of the worst films of the year, and I don't think it's a desperate ripoff. I think it was kind of an irresistible temptation for the director to make this film. It was made by Hal Needham, who was one of Hollywood's best stunt wranglers and stuntmen, and the idea of taking all of those strange things that happen in the Roadrunner cartoons, like the boulder landing on the head, falling off the cliff, running into the mountain, and restaging them with real actors and with stuntmen must have been, to him, kind of a noble experiment, even if it didn't work.
A noble experiment for 10 minutes. When you get to 90 minutes, you need more of a story. They didn't have one.
Well, I think it was kind of a noble experiment, and you don't.
Well, this little sex symbol in the balcony reminds us it's time for the Dog of the Week, when we each pick the week's worst movie. You only get one bark on this show, baby. Okay, go to it, Rod.
I think he's seen my movie. I wonder he stopped barking at all, because my dog this week is a disgusting, violent, mean-spirited thriller from England called Terror. And the ads for it show a terrified woman being prodded by giant knife blades, and I'm afraid that's an all-too-accurate image for this film. This movie hates women, right, Spot? Mm-hmm. It gives us gruesome chase scenes and gory close-ups as a mysterious killer stalks his victims, and the screen is soaked with blood. The audience is stunned with one slashing knife attack after another. Terror is an insult to our intelligence. It thinks we won't care about the characters unless they're murdered on a regular basis, and this is a vile film.
Sounds terrible. You bet, Spot. Now, here's a horror film double bill playing at drive-ins all over the country. Cemetery Girls is one feature, coupled with Grave Desires. Now, when I went to the drive-in, Grave Desires was on first. Maybe I should have stayed to see Cemetery Girls. It couldn't have been worse. Grave Desires is a cheaply made Italian picture about a busload of tourists who wind up stranded in a strange, deserted town. Well, it turns out all the people who live in the town only come out at night, and then they eat all the tourists. Nice town. Grave Desires has some hocus pocus involving a little boy who keeps appearing and disappearing around a gravestone. But when he puts a little girl in a grave, that's when I started my car and left the drive-in playing Grave Desires.
And so much for a couple of very doggy dogs of the week. Let's take another look at the major movies on this program. And this really doesn't happen very often, Gene, but we agree on all 5 movies this week. And on 4 of the 5, we don't think you ought to see them. So that kind of indicates we're in the dog days of late summer. The only movie we both admired this week, and we really did admire it, was Breaking Away, the funny and goofy and heartfelt story of 4 high school graduates coming of age in downstate Indiana. We both sincerely recommend you see this PG-rated comedy, and that's why there's a yes next to both of our names. But we cannot recommend the silly, breathless, dumb Golden Girl, starring Susan Anton as allegedly the world's most beautiful running machine. And we can't recommend Just You and Me, Kid, even though it is always fun to watch George Burns at work. And we can't recommend The Frisco Kid, a movie that tries to be a western, a comedy, a romance, an adventure, winds up not being very much of anything. And boy, is this getting negative, you know. We also cannot recommend that you see The Villain, the western comedy in which the characters were all inspired by the exploits of the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. So we didn't like 4 out of 5, Gene. Is there any hope for next week? Or?
Well, I've seen a couple of the pictures, and it's going to get better. But as you say, we're really in the dog days. There are no serious pictures coming out now. They come out in the fall. Right now, we got horror films for kids and drive-ins.
So I guess what we can say this time is, for the next 2 weeks, keep your sanity and have a good time by seeing Breaking Away, and we'll try to have better news for you next week.
Yes, and next on Sneak Previews, we're going to feature reviews of the haunted house thriller, The Amityville Horror. Also, North Dallas 40, with Nick Nolte as a professional football player, and more American Graffiti, a continuation of the popular film about the 60s, plus the Muppet movie, starring who else but Kermit the Frog. Until then, see you at the movies.